Hey everyone, welcome to another Godot tutorial. My name is Jacob Fox, and right off the bat, if you would like to skip my intro and go straight into the video, you can go ahead and go to the timestamp on the screen, get right to the tutorial. With that out of the way, this video is something of a part 2 to my previous video, which you can find in the top right corner, about RPG items in Godot, and more than that, how to use resources to your advantage and really leverage the strength of the Godot engine. So this video takes it a step further. I got a few comments. Everyone was really nice about my video. I got some really nice feedback, and I really appreciate everyone watching it and subscribing for more tutorials and for weighing in on what you thought about the use of resources in this way. I do, in my personal games, use resources in a way that kind of combines old and current techniques. Essentially, I can convert all of my items, my resources, into a CSV so I can see them in Excel or Google Sheets, and then I can compare all my items, for instance, at once. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to do that and why that would be useful. Obviously, resources can be hard to track just from the engine. This is the same project as the previous video, and you can see here are my items. I only have 3 items. I did add an apple item if you're watching the previous video right before this. But with hundreds of items, it would be hard to track, you know, if you've done an item before or if you want to find an item really quickly. So that's one reason why having everything in a nice spreadsheet would be advantageous. Also, you'll notice that in this video, I went ahead and wrote all the code beforehand. I will go through this line by line and explain what everything does. I find that I have a harder time explaining things while I'm coding, but I love teaching, and I hope that I'll be able to explain things better and more eloquently with the code already written. So, all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and hop in. And as always, if you would like to subscribe and like this video, I would be very appreciative. I will be posting a lot more Godot tutorials as well as devlogs for my current game, Verdant Vale, which you can hear a little bit about in my previous video, or you can check out the Kickstarter link below to follow it. So, without further ado, let's start everything up. So, the way that I like to convert resources, and this can be used for any resources, not just items. I use it for dialogues and quests as well. I like to convert them to CSVs by way of an editor plugin. So if you've never used editor plugins before, basically Godot Engine is a game itself. Everything you see on the screen, you can edit and you can change and you can add to. When I found that out, that was game-changing, that I could change the editor myself and add tools to make my process easier. And I'm not going to go super far into detail about how to do that, how to write editor plugins, or how to use the keyword script, or the keyword tool in your scripts, rather. But I can do that in a later episode of my tutorial series if you are interested in that, so please let me know in the comments below. Anyway, editor plugins are very useful, and you can do it a couple ways. Up at the top of the screen, you see there's this asset lib, and you see all of these different plugins that different developers have written. You can add them to your games and do all sorts of things. There are some fantastic plugins out there, and maybe I'll do a video about them some other time, but you can also create your own plugin. So this is how I did it the first time in my own game. But for this tutorial, I decided not to do it via plugin. I decided to do it via a singleton. So there are benefits to both. If you want to share your plugin more easily, you can write it here. Just do create and follow the instructions. Again, this video isn't quite about that, but if you want to know more about that, I can teach you about that in a later video. So what I did was I created a script for the conversion loader. So I made a little tools folder under my grand folder structure. I made a resource converter. And although some of the functions are based around converting item resources into a CSV, this can be used for any resources, like I said before. So all it takes is a little fiddling around with what I've written. So I made this function. It extends editor plugin, which is different than a lot of the different types that are native to Godot. Editor plugin, like I was saying earlier, can be used to add anything to the editor itself. It also uses the tool keyword, which means that it's running in the editor. Now you have to be careful when you use tools, because if you have a process function, that will process every frame that the editor is up as well. And there are ways to get around that. But for now, I just recommend if you have a process function in a scene, it's probably best to not use tool until you know more about how tool is used. But again, later video stuff. So now I have a path of the converter scene, which I'll get to in a second, but I made a scene down here that is the resource converter. I made a variable for the docked scene. This will hold the scene itself. I preloaded the converter scene also, and it's a good habit to get into if you're going to define paths or preload, to make them constants so that you can then change it in one place in your code and not have this string 4 times throughout a script or more. So on enter tree, this is when the conversion loader is actually loaded into the tree. It makes the docked scene an instance of the converter path. So it takes the resource converter, instances it, sets it to the docked scene, and now this function is specific to editor plugins themselves. There are several different variables that you can set this to. This basically says where you're going to dock this scene. So the scenes that you put in your editor can be any control scenes, and that adds so much potential. You can even make like pop-up windows, you can make grids, you can make whatever you want. And I'd like to make a third part to this series where I show you how you can read CSVs in the Godot engine itself, so you don't have to click over to Excel or to Google Sheets or whatever you may enjoy opening your CSVs in. Regardless, this function takes 2 parameters. This is where the scene is going, and this is what the scene is. So it puts this scene in this spot, and right now this docks the scene in the the left upper right. On the screen, I'll have some of the different variables. Actually, we can go ahead and check out what they all are, just hitting Control left click. The dock slots are we've got all of these: bottom right, upper right, bottom left, upper left, yep, upper right, bottom right, and max, which is the big one. So this is an enum of all of the different slots that you can put things into. Very handy. Recommend taking a look at that because the possibilities are really, really cool. Then the last thing in this script is when it exits the tree. So when you close the editor itself, removes this scene from the docks, and then it frees up that space. So easy enough, right? This is a very simple scene. A very simple script, rather, sorry. But what do you do with this? Well, I referenced this in my previous video a little bit, but what you need to do is make a singleton out of this. Now this is, if you go ahead and do the plugin route, if you go to asset lib and go to plugins and create and use this script as your plugin home, then you don't need to make this a singleton. However, I like to make it a singleton because then I can call functions from the conversion loader throughout my project. What singletons are, and maybe this is for another video, but singletons are always in the scene tree of a game. They're always loaded. This data is always there when you're playing a game, which means that if you want to be able to load your items or save your items into a CSV in the middle of your game, like when you save your game, you can do that. It can happen behind the scenes, so I like to do that. Anyway, I'll go ahead and show you this. Go ahead and click this folder. Mine is in tools, then resource converter, and then I have conversion loader. Now you can name this whatever you want to name it. I like to make my singleton nodes all caps. just because then I can see visually that it is a singleton or some sort of defined variable within the engine. So I went ahead, made conversion loader, there it is, it's enabled. Now we can close this. That means that this script is already running. So now we have to go and create the resource converter itself. This is a fairly simple, although it may not quite look like it, scene. It is a control scene, and you can see on the left in my scene tree, I have just a control node up top. You can make this any type, and just like any other control nodes, if you're making a UI, you can add whatever you want to this. Mine's very simple, not very pretty, but you can add texture X to it. You can add scroll containers if you have a bunch of buttons. In my own games, I have like a dev toolbar here, and then I have 10 buttons that I can press to initiate different tools. Right now, I just have a convert button, and it just says convert to CSV. Very, very simple. I connected this signal, the press signal, to onConvertPressed, which you'll see down here, and it just runs this function convert to CSV. Before I get to the main bulk of the file, I did want to also show that I have a couple general helpers that I like to put in a global variable singleton in all my games so that I can pull these wherever I want to. This function just lists files from the directory, and this function lists all directories within a directory path. I'll tell you why I did those, but essentially this code is straight from the docs themselves. So, you know, it works, and you can also fiddle around with it however you want to. So, up at the top, again, we have the tool keyword evoked so that this resource converter can run in the editor window. I have a few constants, the repo path. In my previous video, I set up a repo folder to hold all of my item resources, and then I set up subfolders for the different types of items. I set up an armor folder and a food folder. You can have all different types. You can even nest them, so food if you want drinks in there, and pastries in there as well. You can have subfolders for that. You just have to add a little bit more smarts to recursively get all of those files within those folders. If you want to go that far, I would just suggest looking into, you know, the file class. Type file, hit control, and then left click, and then read through the file class in the docs. The docs are very good. But for what I have here, I also have an output path where I want to save my CSVs. I made a folder here, and you can see these two CSVs from a previous trial that I did. You can choose to make them output wherever you want to. You don't even need it to be within the file structure of the game itself. It can be anywhere on your computer. I have a constant that is a flag, so if I want to get the types, I'll explain this in a little bit. For now, I set my bool to true because I want to grab the types every time I convert my data, and then I have just an empty array of the item types. Again, this will change depending on your use case. So this function, convert to CSV, holds a lot of the strength of this scene. As my note says, converts all the items within the repo path into CSV files based on their type. So this function takes, down in the bottom left, it takes all of these different types, armor and food and whatever else, converts these into their respective types. It makes headers of those, and then puts all of that data into CSVs for the different types of items. So if I want to see all the food items, I just open up the CSV, boom, bam, easy peasy. So we start off with if get types. This is the flag from before, and I set it to true for now, but if you want to set item types yourself, or resource types, whatever, I could go armor, food, set this to false, and then I don't have to worry about whatever. These are just the different directories within repo. So you could even go food, drinks, if you had a folder in here called drinks and files within drinks. That's all, only if you want to, but this way you can change how everything is set up fairly easily. But for right now, I'll have the code do all the work for me, and it'll get the types whenever I hit the button to convert to CSV. It'll print all my item types. I have it there just for demonstration purposes. I set up all of my variables that I'm going to need in my loops down below. So I make a new file. This array is a list of all of the files within a directory. Current resource is whatever resource is open. You'll see that a little below. Headers are the different variables and the header types within the CSV. And here's my CSV string, which holds all of the data that will go into the CSV file. So this for loop will create the separate CSVs. This is the workhorse of the function itself. It loops through all the item types. So in this case, armor and food. I have a clearing headers and CSV strings just so that I keep those fresh. Files, this will evoke my function from down below to list all the files in the directory. It grabs the repo path, which you'll remember from above, points to my repo. It'll put the item type, which is armor or food, and then it'll add a terminating slash. If there are no files, it will continue. Continue is a keyword to basically skip this run and go to the next item type. So it'll stop here, go back to the for loop. If there's another item type, it'll run. Otherwise, it'll skip. Or leave the for loop, rather. This call opens the file at the output path. This opens the CSV itself. So it takes, it creates a file or opens it. In this demonstration, I'm wiping all the data from the CSVs every time and completely making it again. But if you want to, you can open the file and begin appending at the end of the file. But right now, yes, I'm just writing at the beginning. So there you go. Now I'm using current resource from above, and I'm loading the first file out of all the files in this type. Now this is inherently kind of a little bit of a waste. I'm loading this file twice, once now and once later, which you'll see. I put a little note here so that you can keep in mind that if you want to, you can declare a class script to parse instead. All right, so what does that mean? So in my classes, instead of loading the file itself, instead of making the current resource, you know, and getting the script from that, you could use this food item class or armor item class and get the script for that and get the resource headers. I'll show you this function in a second. This will keep you away from loading one resource twice, but I went ahead and just did it this way because it was the cleanest way of writing it, and I didn't want to have to declare all of my different classes at the top. If, for instance, I was going to do that alternative method, I could go const and then class path. Let's go ahead and just drag this in. Godot is very nice. You can just drag things straight into your code. This is where my classes are. And then I can make const. Let's do class substring. And then this will just be item class GD. So the substring is because all of my different types are delimited by this item class.gd. So you could use your class substring if you wanted to. Var, let's do class script equals class substring. Then we're going to go ahead and actually, let's do class path. I said I wasn't going to write code while I was doing this, but now I want to. Plus file, let's do class substring. And let's go item type. Oops. So, well now, so I am setting, I'll explain this in a second. I want to make sure I got the function right. I can't remember if lower is the right function. To lower. Oops. No worries, no worries. Totally lost it. All right, so I made this class script be the class path from above plus file. This is a very handy function because it will add a / at the end if there isn't one, or it'll ignore it. It'll add the item type, which in this case would be armor because armor is first, to lower because my item classes are lowercase, plus the class substring. And now this class script has this file location in it. You can take this class script, then you can just do class script, put it in here, easy peasy. I'm gonna go ahead and delete this, but that's how you would go about doing that. Might have gotten a couple things wrong, so bear that in mind. But that's how you go about doing that. So now with the file, we get the script of the resource, and then we use this function get resource headers. So we'll go down here to get resource headers. I wrote this. You pass in a GDScript file, and it finds all of the script properties. This is inherent in all GDScript files. This is in the type GDScript. It's there. For every property, it just, the headers push back the property name. So for instance, it would push back, let's pull up food item class. It would pull up the item class stuff. So item name, item texture, quantity, hover text. And then for armor, it would pull up defense as well. So it would pull up those 5 and to return those headers in an array of strings. Now, back to get resource headers, fills that into headers. Now we put the headers into the CSV string, so loops through the headers into the CSV string. We build all those headers with commas, of course, and then we strip the last one. There are cleaner ways of doing this without having to use another line, but yeah, whatever. Then we add a new line, so we're ready to go. Now, we loop through all of the files, because above we found all the files in the directory, the item directory itself. Looping through the files, we load the file into the current resource. Now we use this function, get resource data. We're gonna pass in current resource and the headers, and then we're gonna add a new line at the end and append it to the end of the CSV string. So let's go to this get resource data function. We're still in resource converter. And like you saw above, item of type resource. I like declaring my types because I'm a hardware programmer boy, and that's very important even when I'm using dynamically typed languages. And there is apparently, supposedly, in Godot 4, this is a little bit of a tangent, but apparently in Godot 4 there's a markedly improved performance update to statically typing variables. So optional typing, but there you go. This gets the data from the resource and returns a comma-separated string of that data. So make a line variable, make this property. Again, I like to declare my variables before loops. Again, this is just part of my education, was to declare things before loops so that memory was already allocated. Looping through the properties, get the property. Now, this is where things can get a little hairy. It depends on what kind of variables, what kind of properties are in your resources themselves. I have strings, and in CSVs, it's important to add quotes if you have things like apostrophes or commas, so that you can, so when you're parsing, you can see that they are strings and not, you know, another part of the CSV or another piece of data. So that's why I have this, if the type of the property is the type string, add quotes around the property, easy. Otherwise, if the property is a stream texture, so this is because in my items, I have a texture. And for things like white shirt, once you load a texture into this, it becomes a stream texture, which is different than just the PNG. It becomes a .stex, I believe, for stream texture. So if the stream texture, you need to get the path of it instead of just loading, because otherwise it would end up looking like, it would look like this in your CSV, which is not useful at all. So again, you have to play around with it in your own application, but this is how I get around using textures and stuff. And then finally I add the line to, and a comma to, sorry, I add the property and a comma to the line, and then strip the last one as I did before. Again, there are easier ways of doing that, but whatever. And then I return the line. So let's go back up above. Oops, here we go. Finally, the CSV string is complete, so we're gonna store the string, we're gonna close the file, and then I have it printing for demonstration purposes. So let's go ahead and demonstrate. What I didn't show you before, which is the really cool thing about editor plugins, is my little tab up here that says resource converter. Sorry, I can't zoom in up there. It's been here this whole time since I added the conversion loader into the singletons and enabled it. So we're gonna go over here and you see this button from the resource converter. Let's click this button and now you see all my data popped up in the print window. The item types that found armor and food. This is the white shirt.tres is the only resource it found. And then here's the CSV for the armor, and I'll show you all of this in Excel as well. It'll be above the screen as I'm speaking right now, but here you can clearly see all of this data is right down there. So there you go. This is a very handy way of organizing your resources and also to be able to use Godot as the powerhouse that it really is. It has great potential for organizing your data. All you have to do is write a little bit extra code, but something like this I could even release as a plugin, and you could use it in your own projects. So let me know what you guys think. In the next video, I think I would like to show you how you can open CSVs in the Godot engine and display them in some sort of grid so that you can see it like in a spreadsheet, except just on another tab. That, however, is for another day. So as before, I am Jacob Fox. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. I hope you learned something. At the very least, I hope you learned how some people may be using this engine. And if you end up using this in your projects, let me know. If you have any suggestions for other sorts of tutorials that I could do, please also let me know. If there's anything in this video that you have questions about, comment down below, at me on Twitter, all that stuff. All my links are in the description below. Yeah, I'd also really like to do a video about tools and editor plugins because they are so powerful, and I am a huge advocate for using Godot engine for what it is. So yeah, there you go. Really, thanks again, everyone. And if you want to support me further, you can check out my Kickstarter. The pre-launch page is in the description below. You can go ahead and follow that on Kickstarter. I'll talk more about my project in the coming weeks on this channel. So again, please subscribe. Thank you all. I'm very, very appreciative of all of you. And have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone.